Welcome to the One Shot Show where GMs go to level up. My name is Matt.
And my name is Mock.
It's one of those letter swap things, though I suppose it's a vowel. It's Mock Markridge.
It is indeed. Mock Markridge.
And today, for our very first episode, we wanted to kick it off. My idea for this was we were going to call it Origins. That's a terrible name.
Quite frankly, the worst idea you've
really
ever
bad.
had. Yeah.
So what we actually want to cover off in this very first episode, because this whole podcast is geared towards people who are either already running D&D or tabletop RPGs or are interested in it, we want to talk about the things that kind of inspire our games, that could inspire your games, and sort of the general bed of inspiration that a lot of modern tabletop role-playing games has drawn from over the years.
We want to find out why the fuck you would even start a game.
Yeah.
Where's that idea coming from?
Yeah.
Matt, I've got a question for you.
Hit me.
I want to know, are you a fan of setting your games inside of existing worlds, or do you go for total originality?
That's a really good question. Always original, always homebrew. The only time I maybe wouldn't is if I'm dead fresh to a system, or it's, within an existing IP where there's a very limited kind of setting. Like if you're doing a Dune RPG game, you kind of have to set it on Arrakis, right? You can still come up with custom stuff within that framework, sure, but I usually go fully homebrew on settings.
Is world building part of the appeal to you for running games?
A little bit. Not so much world building, and to be honest, this probably could and should be an episode in its own right, but it's less the world building to me. It's I world build from a perspective of what stories can actually tell within that world, which is why I go custom. Because then if I have a particular thing I'm trying to accomplish, a particular tone that I want it to take on, or just a particular kind of wider stakes story that's going on behind the scenes, then I want to come up with a custom setting to.
As a man who is a fan of complete and total originality, do you ever stoop so low as to steal anything from other media ever?
No, everything I come up with is original, of course.
That is incredible.
Even
I am blown away.
Because of course, the point there obviously is nothing is truly original, right? Like you are the sum of your influences with maybe a little bit, so the remaining 20% is your own stuff, right? Something like that.
What have you stolen from the most in your own games?
Okay, the big ones for me, actually, genuinely. I borrow a lot. I went through a Greek phase. I don't know if people apparently that's a thing that some other people have. My partner went through a Greek phase, and I think that's
Everybody goes through a Greek phase.
Yeah,
everybody who plays tabletop RPGs knows the entire Greek pantheon is a common experience.
And I feel like this is really weird to say, but I remember reading the Iliad and Odyssey. And the funny thing about the Iliad is it's one of two surviving works of Homer's, and there was 7 works in total. The other 5 are completely lost. And when you're reading it, it's just name dropping all these people. It's like the Avengers. It's like a team up movie for a bunch of movies you never saw. You didn't get to see the Achilles origin story, the Ajax one. The only other one you actually get is the Odysseus one, obviously the Odyssey. And to me, there was something about that it was just everyone's here for the big war, the biggest war ever. And it feels so momentous as soon as you pick it up and start reading it. That's something that's a real big inspiration for me. I like starting my games, with a little bit of humble origin, but that's where I want to end up at any given time. I want to end up at everyone's here now. This is the big one.
I also want to say, quite the flex you've read them. It's also okay if you happen to just watch a YouTube breakdown of the Iliad and Odyssey because you were interested.
Nothing wrong with it.
So it's mostly things you've read, classic works, real-world mythology, shit you'll kind of throw together to get the kind of vibe that you want for your world.
Yeah, and tone is a big part of it, right?
What is tone, Matt?
What
what does tone mean?
That could be something in its own right. There could be a whole discussion in its own right. But it's we've often shared the remark. I think it was a mutual player of ours shared the remark that your games are like Terry Pratchett, my games are like Brandon Sanderson. That's what tone means. You can pick up a Terry Pratchett book and immediately it's Pratchett, right? There's a feel to it, there's a style to it, and you can capture something akin to that in the stories that you're telling over your games.
So you want to find inspiration from serious, epic, complex works and run games inside those worlds.
Yeah, and you on the other hand.
I'm a very silly boy.
Yeah, you're just
very silly. A very silly boy, Matt.
You do. You like a laugh. You like a bit of you like a giggle in your games. And I respect that about you.
I am kind of similar in that I take a lot of my inspiration from things that I have read. I'm a voracious book reader, love young adult fantasy. It is honestly the pinnacle of art that our civilization
You're a
has ever
romantasy guy?
created. Romantasy? A little bit.
Fair. I really respect your honesty just then.
Oh, we can't even go into that, Matt. That is going to reveal a lot about me. But what I will say is that if you are into romantasy, I highly recommend audiobooks because those voice actors really sell it.
And no one knows. No one knows what you're reading when it's an audiobook.
Exactly. You're sitting there on the train, your earbuds
No one
in.
knows.
It's your secret.
Yeah. I like to think that we'll be like that one day. We'll just be your little secret on the train while you're listening to us. No one knows that it's Matt and Mock in your ears. But genuinely, so, to kind of wind it back to the topic of inspiration, like some of the core that I feel like we're kind of getting to is it's pretty standard to, in your own games, be generally inspired by like the bed of media that you're experienced with. And I am of the general opinion that throughout tabletop RPGs, that's how it's been always. If you go way back to the early origins of Dungeons & Dragons, which is sort of the grandfather of modern TTRPGs, it actually harkens back to wargaming. It was basically a war game, but instead of big squads and, tactics and all that, it's like individual guys. And then the storytelling element of it is the thing that has kind of grown about that over the years to create the modern kind of TTRPG, especially when we're looking at fantasy and sci-fi. And the other way in which I think you can really see that is the number of IP-specific systems there are out there, right? Like, Star Wars is a story in its own right. It's a piece of media that it exists. And there's a half dozen RPG systems set within the Star Wars universe that use the Star Wars IP so that you can tell stories very specifically with the tone and the style of thing that Star Wars itself brings to the screen.
I think what I'm taking out of that is that people are inspired continually by shit they love. If they love Lord of the Rings, they're going to run a game in Lord of the Rings. And even though both Matt and we both are absolutely dedicated homebrewers who build entire worlds of our own, there is absolutely nothing wrong with saying, guys, I love Skyrim. I know everybody loves Skyrim.
Yeah.
It may be basic, but you know exactly what you were getting into. It is easy to build the world up, and you can easily get buy-in from your players if they know exactly what they're getting into.
And that's, weirdly enough, it's, you say that when you're kind of homebrewing and you're doing that, you're taking that approach and you can just sort of say, look, it's going to be a bit like this. Like, here's how I want it to feel. Like, I've run stuff in my games where I've got, okay, this arc of the story is probably going to feel a little bit like an old school Legend of Zelda game, right? But the other thing that's really useful with that, in terms of things that inspire you, is if you have that common bed of sort of media literacy around a particular setting.
You're starting with a shared language with your players.
But I was going to say IP-specific ones are great for that, right? I picked up the Fallout RPG because I love Fallout, and most of my regular players also love Fallout. None of us need to learn anything. It's already an RPG in as a computer game. It's really easy to translate that to pen and paper. There's that shared familiarity, and everyone immediately knows what they're getting into. It's a little bit pulpy. It's a little bit wacky. It can get quite serious. We all know that tone intuitively. And then, in turn, I would say I've drawn inspiration from that IP in my own home games in totally different genres and systems.
You're bringing up something really interesting.
Oh, I love when I do that by accident.
Oh, you do that. When you're saying you are basing Fallout is most famously, it is a video game first and foremost.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of Dungeons and Dragons specifically, at the back of any of the Dungeon Master's guides, you will see they have included a list of books that the game designers have listed as their specific inspirations. And you will see Jack Vance, Michael Moorcock, George Martin, J.R.R. Tolkien listed down there. What you won't see are video games. You won't see movies. But the new generation of gamers, and I personally run a lot of games for teenagers. And the amount of fucking Minecraft memes that make it into my tabletop games is physically painful.
Yeah.
But this is the new source of inspiration. It is audiovisual media.
Yeah. The thing that's so entertaining about that to me is The reason you'll never see those influences in the back of the book is because that would be the cart leading the horse. It's D&D that inspired those games, not the other way around, right? Like big sprawling fantasy RPGs exist because of the legacy of big sprawling fantasy tabletop RPGs. It's, if you imagine the people who first developed early digital RPGs, they were being inspired by their D&D games. In fact, have you watched The Expanse?
I have,
Okay,
yes.
I've
also read it because I could
This is
also
great.
read.
Early in The Expanse, to give you an idea of how this works, I can rattle off a half dozen books and media that have been directly one-to-one inspired by a tabletop role-playing campaign. The Expanse, if you're watching in the early episodes, there's a guy, they're aboard the prison frigate, and a rail shot plows through the hull of this, knocks his head clean off. He's out. He's dead. He's gone. He seemed like a very fleshed out, interesting character with more to reveal. Totally gone. That series is based on the books. So that beat is in the books as well. The books are based on a tabletop sci-fi role-playing game that the author was running, and a player had to leave the table after a couple of sessions. He went, hey, look, I'm really sorry. I can't actually give the time to this anymore. I'm going to have to duck out of the campaign. The guy running it, the game master, went, okay, cool. That's how he wrote the character out. They're aboard the prison frigate. He goes, sorry, I can't make the next session. I got to drop out. He has him get shot in the head by a railgun. Fantastic. He's written a player out. He's up to the stakes. It feels really real. That has carried forward through every single iteration of that media up until the TV show that you watch.
So the point that you're making really is that all fantasy, sci-fi, games, media, movies are now one gigantic self-feeding Ouroboros.
It's one big circle.
Inspiring each other continually in like a massive chain of mutation all the way down.
Genuinely, yeah. Like that's why we say, you are all of your inspirations and then maybe 20% originality. And even then, that originality is probably filtered through the other things that have inspired you. The thing that's really funny to me about that, people talk about this all the time and it sounds like nonsense, but it is true, is like, humans have been storytellers forever, right? So when we talk about like the never-ending circle of inspiration, that's just like a thread that's stretching all the way back throughout history, right? Like the works of Homer were ancient to the ancient Greeks.
Yeah, I just want to reassure anybody listening that you don't need to read the fucking Odyssey to be valid as a dungeon master. You are most welcome to go watch the Minecraft movie and set an adventure in the Minecraft movie. And if you trace it back far enough, you will get back to the Odyssey, and you can quote me on that.
You can. It's totally true. Well, I mean, actually, I'll talk briefly about the Odyssey specifically, because that is a style of campaign that I love running when I know I'm running a limited term of campaign, right? Because if you look at that story, it starts at the end of the Trojan War, Odysseus has to get home, that's it. And the whole story is just one fucking thing after another until he eventually gets home. Now that means if you want to run a campaign that is just one fucking thing after another, you can decide how many fucking things it's going to be. It might be 5 fucking things, and at the end of them, you're home, campaign's done, maybe that takes 10 sessions.
So we're breaking
20,
down
right?
D&D and any role-playing game into
just
fucking
one
things.
fucking thing after another.
Got it, that's our units.
But the thing that's fascinating about that is if you look at The Hobbit, right? The Hobbit is they need to get here, and they need to get back. And you know what? One fucking thing after another just happens the whole way along. And if we talk about Lord of the Rings being a big inspiration for fantasy RPGs, I actually think The Hobbit is in many ways a better one because it's got that exact feel of everyone just kind of like meets around a table and then you all just kind of like spring off into this great big adventure that spirals out into wider stakes as you go further along, right? But that's where that idea of story comes from. Bilbo just gets sucked into one fucking thing after another and he doesn't get home for like 5 years.
And I think I mean, listen, saying that The Hobbit is fantastic, that's my favorite book of all time. That's video games, that's movies, it's all one fucking thing after another. And just steal from whatever it is you love. It doesn't have to be as highbrow as The Odyssey and Lord of the Rings. It can be any game, any book, any movie. Turn it into whatever game you want.
Yep.
Or homebrew everything from scratch.
Yep.
And you're stealing from like multiple sources, you're putting in themes from different little things, you're creating this kind of chimeric monster, and you're dropping your players into it.
Yeah. And to kind of loop it back to what I was talking about at the start, when I'm actually deciding what I'm putting together, what I'm building, I'm thinking very actively about the kind of story I want to run, the kind of story that I'm interested in having, and then I kind of work backwards from that.
And that's one approach. The approach that I took when I put together the live show I did at Armageddon is I started with my puns.
Yep.
And then I
Valid.
worked backwards to build my entire adventure around delivering my puns. And the pun that I am proudest of is inserting cryptocurrency into the game.
Oh, nice.
It was a bunch of skeletons mining treasures from below the ground from an ancient dungeon. Because they're dead, it's cryptocurrency.
That's really good.
And that's also an equally valid way. You can read the Odyssey, or you can start from puns.
I love those work backwards things as well, by the way. I'm going to throw in, and I'll round us off with this lovely little anecdote from my most recent stint of world building for a campaign. I have a city in that campaign called Kenote. It's a very wealthy merchant city. It's probably the wealthiest, general city in the known world. And that is where the term banknote comes from, because their currency is small fabric versions of the Kenote banner, or Banner's Kenote, which has been shortened over the years to banknote. And that's where the word for currency comes from.
This is permission to be as cringe as you want for your players.
Absolutely. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Do we have any sort of final notes, any final things that we feel need to be tossed into this topic before we package it up and ship it out?
No, I think I'm done with this.
We're well covered.
I think we're done.
Well, this has been the One Shot Show, and I sure hope you have, in fact, leveled up. I've been Matt, that's been Mock, and we'll see you in the next one.